I'm going to call upon Pauline Matanga, the PR and Communications Manager for St. Peter's, to give us an opening prayer.
Thank you. Father, in the name of Jesus, we say, Ebenezer, this is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. We thank you for St. Peter's. We thank you for all the organizations represented here. We thank you for each and everyone in this house. We pray that you bless us as we are going to deliberate on tobacco issues. Father, be with us now and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you. You may be seated. Without further ado, I'm going to call upon the Chief Finance Officer of St. Peter's, Mr. Farai Matamire. He's going to give us opening remarks. Mr. Matamire, please come to the podium.
Thank you, Bridget. Good morning to you all. I'm standing here on behalf of Mr. Legetele, who is not able to attend due to some emergencies. He asked me to read his speech, and I'll straight get into the speech. Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, Professor Ojiri in absentia. I'm sure he will join us later. Tobacco Industry and Marketing Board Chairman Patrick Devenish, Tobacco Industry and Marketing Board Acting Chief Executive Emmanuel Matraile, Ambassador Chris Mutangwa, distinguished guests, industry leaders, tobacco growers, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of St. Peter's, I'm honored to welcome you to today's tobacco conference. This conference is part of a series of events that we host through our various platforms as the largest mass media group in the country. It reflects our commitment to provide a conducive space for shareholders from diverse fields to discuss critical issues related to their respective areas of interest. While media outlets like newspapers, radio, and television continue to serve as the primary channels for factual dissemination of information, conferences offer a powerful new approach for us as media organizations to influence and shape policy development. They allow us to bring together experts on specific topics and disciplines to facilitate focused discussions among all relevant parties. We believe conferences are a powerful tool for influencing policy development, which remains one of the core functions of the media. Tobacco industry plays a significant role in Zimbabwe's economy, and this conference aims to address some of its complexities. One of journalism's core principles is presenting a balanced perspective encompassing all sides of issues. Conferences, by bringing together stakeholders with diverse viewpoints, are also instrumental in achieving this balanced perspective. The approach goes beyond mass communication. It enables sector-specific, in-depth discussions and fosters potential collaboration among key players, ultimately shaping policy for the betterment of the nation. Importantly, conferences eliminate the potential for censorship, which can sometimes heavily distort information reaching audiences. This ensures unfiltered discussions with a more complete picture, ultimately leading to greater impact on shaping and influencing policy. I am confident that the discussions today will be thoughtful, insightful, and productive. Thank you once again for joining us, and let us have a successful tobacco conference. I thank you.
Another round of applause for Mr. Matamire for the welcome remarks. Now that we have been welcomed by by the boss himself, I thought maybe let me introduce some of the management, senior management for Zen Papers in our midst, so that during the break, during lunchtime, you can mix and mingle with them. Let me introduce to you the Digital Publishing Division General Manager, Mr. Munyaradza. Please be upstanding, sir. Can we get hands on him? Somebody may be saying, what do you mean by Digital Publishing Division? Digital and Publishing Division for Zen Papers is the division that is hosting this event. It is the newspapers division. And every other newspaper that we have, it does have a digital platform. Therefore, the Digital and Publishing Division. Let me also ask Mr. Mwerega, Gordon Mwerega, the Chief Technology Officer for Zen Papers, to be upstanding. There he is. He's the Chief Technology Officer. We have the Deputy Editor for Business Weekly, Kozi Sharara. Please be upstanding. So he's the main behind this event, Kozi Sharara, and the editor is not here. Let's get hands on it. We have the senior reporter, Martin Hazare. It's Martin around. I know most of you were speaking with Martin in terms of speakers. Martin is a senior reporter for Business Weekly. So let me introduce the first speaker. We now know the people that have hosted us. The first speaker is Mr. Patrick Devenish. Let me read his profile. Mr. Patrick Devenish was appointed on the board of First Capital Bank Limited on the 26th of April 2018. Mr. Devenish has over 20 years experience in tobacco sales industry, having started his career as an auctioneer with Tobacco Sales Law Limited, Harare, and rose through the ranks to become the CEO of TSL Limited. He is also the former CEO of ICO, a former holdings company for SICO and Courtco. Mr. Devenish holds an executive MBA from the Graduate School of Business, University of Cape Town. He is the current board chairman for the Tobacco Industry and Marketing Board. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the podium Mr. Patrick Devenish.
Good morning all. Before I get into the formalities, I was amused when I was asked to talk about the history of the tobacco industry. Does that say something about my age? Director of Ceremonies, our guest of honor, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, Professor Orbit Jerry, heads of government, departments and parastatals, representatives of tobacco companies, auction floors, and industry service providers, leaders of farmers' unions and associations, tobacco farmers, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. I'm here today to talk about the historical perspective of the tobacco industry and emerging trends within our industry. The industry has long and complex history marked by significant shifts and evolving attitudes towards tobacco use. Understanding the historical context is crucial to grasp the current situation and emerging trends that are shaping the industry today, both here and globally. Let us embark on a journey through time, starting with the origins of tobacco production in Zimbabwe. Those of you who've read any historical books about Zimbabwe will know that when the first white people came to Zimbabwe, they came to find gold. They didn't find gold, which is amazing because we now have plenty of gold mines in our country, but those days they didn't find so much, but what they did find was tobacco. And that tobacco was the gold of those early days in our country. Before the European settlers came to Zimbabwe, it is known that indigenous people grew tobacco, a type called Nyoka tobacco. The first claim to successful growing flue-cured tobacco was made in 1894 in Mutare, where a Jesuit priest at Chishawasha Mission, Father Richards, exhibited his first commercially grown tobacco at the first agricultural show held in Harare in 1897. In 1910, the first auction sales took place, but were later abandoned in 1914 due to lack of competition between buyers and overproduction, which is crazy because today anything we produce we can sell around the world. From then on, the crop was sold through various methods, including sales by private treaty, cooperative selling, where growers were contracted to sell their crops to what was known as the Tobacco Cooperative Society. In 1934, there was another surplus, and what they did then was they took 20% of each grower's crop, removed it from the open market, and disposed of it privately and destroyed some of it. By 1935, it became apparent to growers as well as buyers that a more orderly system of sale was necessary. So legislation was introduced under pressure from a growers' body at that time. In 1936, the Tobacco Marketing and Levy Act was promulgated. This act provided for the formation of the Tobacco Marketing Board, now the Tobacco Industry and Marketing Board, TIMB, and the compulsory selling of tobacco through auction floors. In 1946, classification of Flue-Cured Virginia tobacco, statistical and market reporting purposes was introduced. That was a very, very important step. Often when you walk past a sale and you see the guys classifying, you don't take much notice. I can assure you they're doing a very, very important job so that we can manage the statistical side of the business. In 1947, international economic forces again upset the market, and resultant negotiations led to the London Agreement, which offered preferential buying opportunities for United Kingdom manufacturers, thus compromising the concept of free and unfettered auctions. This agreement was revised in 1953 and remained in force until 1961. The free and unfettered auction system was reintroduced in 1962. The system was again interrupted by the unilateral Declaration of Independence in November 1965. In 1973, a return to the open auction system was made, albeit under strict security. An updated Tobacco Marketing Levy Act was published in 1977, and then at independence in 1980, the tobacco industry once again saw a return to the free and unfettered auction system for Flue-Cured Virginia tobacco. Due mainly to the smallness of the crop size, burley tobacco was sold by private treaty, later went to auction system, went back to private treaty, and sadly very little burley is produced in this country anymore. That job goes to Malawi and Mozambique. Other crops, Oriental tobacco, dark air cured, dark fire cured, also by virtue of their small size, are sold by private treaty. Something wrong with this mic. In 1994, the TIMB was reconstituted to cater for the interests of all classes of different stakeholders. That same year saw indigenous buyers participating for the first time in competition with traditional buyers. And those of you who were around will remember the flamboyant Roger Boga coming onto the auction floors and paying huge prices for tobacco, which was very well accepted by the farmers at the time. In 1997, through the Tobacco Marketing and Levy Amendment Act, through the Tobacco Marketing and Levy Amendment Act, the name Tobacco Marketing Board changed to Tobacco Industry and Marketing Board, and subsequent renaming of the Act as the Tobacco Marketing and Levy. The amended Act also brought about a change in the collection of levies, which are now paid direct to the Ministry of Agriculture instead of recognised growers and buyers associations. Recognised growers associations, recognised growers are recognised by the Tobacco Industry and Marketing Board rules, Statutory Instrument 29 of 2000. Tobacco selling in Zim was done exclusively through auctions, whereby tobacco producers took their crop to an auction floor of their choice for its marketing and sale. Under this system, the grower is responsible for mobilizing their own resources. Tobacco is delivered to an auction where the highest bidding buyer secures the produce. Critical factor here was the buyer took no risk in the production process. At this time, the crop had declined from some 236 million kilos in the year 2000 to under 50 million kilos. From the 2004 selling season, the growing and marketing system was changed with the introduction of contract growing and marketing tobacco. Contract growing and marketing is where a buyer provides the inputs required for production and marketing. The buyer then guarantees to buy all the tobacco grown at prices equal to or higher than those prevailing on the auction floor. Currently, we're operating on a dual system, 95% sold under contract and 5% at auction. Having given you a thumbnail sketch of the historical perspective on tobacco production in Zimbabwe, it is also crucial to look at global emerging trends for us as an industry to stay informed about these trends and adapt our strategies accordingly. Emerging trends within the tobacco industry today reflect the evolving landscape of the sector. One of the most notable trends is the decline in cigarette consumption in many developed countries. Public health campaigns, higher taxes, and smoking cessation programs have contributed to this decline. In response, tobacco companies have diversified their product offerings, focusing on alternative products such as e-cigarettes, heated tobacco devices, many others, ways of delivering nicotine. Electronic cigarettes or e-cigarettes have gained popularity in recent years, marketed as a safer alternative to traditional cigarettes. They deliver nicotine through vaporization rather than combustion. However, the long-term health effects of e-cigarettes are still being studied, and concerns have been raised regarding their appeal to young people and its potential gateway effect to smoking. There's a growing demand, this is very important, there's a growing demand for transparency and sustainability across all industries, including, and in our country, especially tobacco. Consumers are increasingly concerned about the environmental and social impact of the products they buy and use. As responsible corporate citizens, it is incumbent upon us to address these concerns. We must focus on sustainable sourcing of tobacco and its inputs, reduce our carbon footprint, and support initiatives that promote the well-being of tobacco farmers, their families, and communities. By adopting sustainable practices and communicating our efforts to our stakeholders, we can build trust and maintain a positive reputation in an ever-changing business landscape. In conclusion, as we navigate the emerging global trends in tobacco, we must be proactive and adaptable. By embracing the shift towards healthier lifestyles, engaging with policy makers, and prioritizing sustainability, we can position ourselves as a responsible industry leader. Let us seize these opportunities to innovate, collaborate, and contribute positively to the well-being of our consumers and communities in which we operate. I think it's important to talk a little bit more about the history that is and has been made over the past few years. The introduction of the contracting system has absolutely revolutionized our industry. Today, in excess of 65% of the tobacco crop is produced by smallholder farmers who are improving all the time in their quality and their yields and their profitability. This has been a really important step in the industry. In the early day, well, before the year 2000, before land reform, we had 1,600 commercial farmers, mostly white. And when you've got only 1,600 farmers, it's a tall and narrow industry. And if you lose a few farmers, you lose a lot of the crop. The smallholder farmers, we've got 140,000 odd farmers, which gives huge breadth to the industry. So there's so much more that can be done. We need to get them irrigating. We need to improve on the agronomy. One of the good things about the contractors is they provide the input and they give the agronomy. So what I'm trying to say is there's two huge changes in the industry. One, the contracting system, and two, the smallholder farmer. That has absolutely revolutionized our industry. And my final words are, Zimbabwe has and always will be recognized as the world's most important producer of flavored smoking leaf. Thank you very much.
A big round of applause for Mr. Patrick Gomes. We are going to have a panel discussion later on. So I will call upon the second speaker, Mr. Emmanuel Machaye. He is the acting chief executive for TIMV. Mr. Machaye, please come to the podium. Can we clap for him?
Thank you, Madam. I've prepared a presentation that needs to be beamed so that we can also see. Okay, to the next slide. Please proceed. So, this is the structure of our industry. We've got the three sectors. The first sector, the production, the marketing sector, the merchant and the manufacturing sector. So above all, we've got the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, where our institution, TIMV, falls within, to oversee these three sectors. Next slide. So in terms of the marketing sector, we currently have got 2 operating auction floors, we've got 3 processors, we've got 15 principal contractors and 19 surrogates. Surrogates are those companies that produce tobacco, market it on behalf of an exporter. We've got 8 manufacturers, I will add number 8, is Mosia Tuna for cigars. So this is what we have in terms of the marketing sector in our industry. We have got 2 new processing plants that are coming up instead 3. So in terms of value addition and beneficiation, we are increasing rapidly in terms of the processing plants that we have in the country. Next slide. Next slide. In terms of production and average price trend since 2000, you see that the average price was basically much better. Last year we had an average price of $3 cents, and this year we're currently hovering around $3.50, which is very firm in terms of the big volumes that we marketed in 2023. Something wrong with the presentation. So you can tell in terms of the production that we had in 2023, where we produced 296.2 million kilograms. The average price $3 cents. In the year 2000, that is where we also produced 236 million kilograms. The average price there was $69. So we are then increasing both in terms of our quantity and quality. Next slide. So my topic that I'm supposed to present here is the current financing model. It's a fairly short topic. I wouldn't waste much time. So in terms of tobacco financing models, we've got 2 forms of financing in the country. We have got offshore financing. I'm sure you skipped another slide behind this slide. That's fine. So in terms of the financing that we have got 2 forms of financing. We've got the offshore financing, which is accounting for 95% of the total financing in the country. We've got local financing that is accounting for 5%. So over and above all these financing, we have to repay the loans that we have taken outside the country. So what we retain in the country is almost 4.5%, because we have to pay back the loans plus interest. The most expensive form of financing here is the local financing, where the interest rates are a little bit higher. So our merchants and all those that are paying in our manufacturing sector are not willing to take up financing from local financing. So offshore financing is predominantly that we are currently sitting on, accounting for about 95% of the total financing in the industry. Next slide. Government initiated a concept that they called Tobacco Value Chain Transformation Plan in a bid to revolutionize the industry, also to, they've got 5 distinct deliverables that they intend to have in 2025. So I will speak shortly about the Tobacco Value Chain Transformation Plan. Next. Oh, I need to be there. Thank you. So the first pillar of the Tobacco Value Chain Transformation Plan is the pillar of productivity. Government intends us to increase productivity. Next. There's also the second pillar where we need to look at value addition and beneficiation. So this is the strong pillar. We also have the pillar of market development. Next. However, entering these 3 pillars, we have got a pillar that we say we need to do, which is local funding. So we term it in term the convergence point. For all this to work, we need local financing in terms of our industry. So this is the anchor pillar. But all this, next, is working broadly from a broader government strategy which they call Agriculture Food System Transformation Strategy that anchors all other crops. We also got our TMB Act. We also got the National Development Strategy 1. We also have got the Vision 20. So this is what is anchoring everything. But what we need to achieve now, the Tobacco Value Chain Plan intends to achieve 300 million kilograms by 2025, a 5 billion industry by 2025, to improve value addition from 2 to 30%. We need to value add 25% by 2025 and optimize our forex benefits. Something wrong with this like this. You also skip some slide. Thank you.
Have you finished, sir? Or it's because that's of the technical nature?
Okay.
All right. Let's clap hands for Mr. Machaire, the acting chief executive. On the technical side, please try to be more efficient. We don't want our speakers to abort their presentations. Thank you. In a short presentation, I actually heard you, Mr. Machaire. 95% offshore financing, 5% local financing, and we need local financing. Yet it is expensive. What do we need to do? I guess this Indaba is going to address that. We are going to jump straight into the panel discussion. I will call upon the moderator of this panel discussion, Mr. Brent Nchema of Oxford Capital, to come to the podium as we clap hands for him. Can we continue clapping hands for him? Please take a seat. I'm going to be introducing Mr. King J, who is part of this panel discussion. Mr. J, Dr. Kingston J, is an agricultural agronomist who is currently a senior lecturer in the Department of Agricultural Business Development and Economics in the Faculty of Agriculture at University of Zimbabwe. He specializes in agricultural value chains and agribusiness development for over 15 years. So that's the short profile that I'm going to speak about Dr. J. I'm also going to call to the podium Mr. Paul Zakaria of Zimbabwe Farmers Union. Mr. Zakaria, please come to the podium. Can we clap hands for Mr. Zakaria? Let's just know a little bit about him. Paul Zakaria is a passionate community and rural development practitioner driven by proper inclusive approaches to development Paul has devoted much of his working life, spanning over 25 years, to working with commercial farmland owners and smallholder farming communities. In various capacities, Paul has helped to develop sustainable models of agriculture production and marketing. So this is the short profile that I'm going to speak about. Can we also go to the podium, Mr. Tapiwa Masenza from Chevron Tobacco. Please come to the podium as we prepare for him. Thank you, Mr. Masenza. Mr. Masenza, his strength lies in blending tobacco for cigarettes, business development, and setting up and managing tobacco-related offer relations at executive level. His extensive international experience has contributed to building a strong clientele in various markets. Over to you, Mr. Brett Chairman.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to moderate on this very interesting topic on the financing model for the tobacco industry. I'm glad I'm accompanied here by the experts, those that blend and those that do everything on the tobacco industry. It's quite an interesting topic, but actually, when we look at the financing model, do we have the right financing model? I think the chairman has spoken about 95%, the CEO as well has spoken about 95% being offshore financing. Don't we have banks in this country? Is this still our industry when 95% of the funding is coming from offshore? What does it say about liquidity management in this country? You know, tobacco is an export product. When you export, you get foreign currency, and it's very important in the management of the exchange rate and stabilizing price and so on. But now, when 95% of the costs are going back or are being, I wouldn't want to say the wrong word here. You need to forgive me. You don't want to ship them out, or rather, do you want to externalize the costs? If you externalize 95% of the costs in US dollars, what does that do to this economy? Does the industry then remain the golden industry that we've known it to be? So, to help us understand whether we have the right financing model, is it balanced? Does it really speak to Vision 2030? Does it as well speak to the need for us to create a better industry, a value efficient industry in this economy? I will start with Mr. Mujay. You are from the university, you know these things better than all of us here. In the world, universities, they need research and knowledge. So I think for now, let's be students and understand whether is the right model and whether it's balanced. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much to the organizers of this event for inviting me to take part in also contribute. And thanks very much to the chairman and the CEO for TIMB for the captivating presentations. Very insightful, but also once when the figures started coming out, to hear that only 12.5, as a country we are only retaining only about 12.5%. I would say that is 12.5 of the value added, isn't it? So if we are to take maybe a holistic approach to the value chain, looking at the value chain approach in terms of benefiting, because when we take a value chain approach, we are interested in the value added across the nodes of the value chain, of the tobacco value chain. And to say that as a country we are retaining 12.5%, and that is what has to be then shared across all the actors of the value chain, and that becomes very worrisome. So the model of financing then that shows it's problematic somehow, and needs some some corrective measures to be taken. So it's important coming up with localization strategy to ensure that we harness the resources locally so that we can rein in, we can retain the value, a bigger chunk of the cake, of the value that is generated by our resources, by the farmers that are producing, by the actors along the tobacco value chain. So it's really critical. And looking at it, accessing this capital coming from offshore, it means there are some contractual obligations that are involved. So that also speaks volumes in terms of the power relations in those kinds of contractual obligations. When we go out to reach out to these owners of capital, wanting them to finance or invest in our value chain. And the proceeds that are coming and the sharing of those proceeds speaks volumes in terms of the dividends that then have to be retained locally. So it's really important that we look and introspect in our model that we have, try to ensure that it's localized. Let's look around what we have in terms of the resources that can be generated to finance. It has happened in other value chains. We've seen armor bills, treasury bills being raised, government guarantees being provided to help ensure that the value chain is well funded from local resources. And we can also take a look at the pensions and insurance, the contributions that are being made by Zimbabweans towards pensions and insurance. Can they not be harnessed towards supporting the tobacco value chain? I think it's one area also that needs to be introspected so that we can increase the local contribution when it comes to financing and investing in the tobacco value chain. And also looking at the contractual relations, when resources to finance production and support the value chain are secured predominantly from offshore sources, that would actually put pressure on our local players when they want to meet their obligations in terms of repayments. And that has got implications on the local value addition, diversification, and beneficiation. So that's why you now see a greater chunk of the commodity being exported in its raw form, so to say, with little or limited value addition. So I think the model needs to be relooked at and reformed under the transformation strategy to ensure that we localize, and localization would actually increase the beneficiation to locals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's take it for so at one time we were students, and you know how it is. Whenever the lecturers are speaking, you pay very good attention. Because sometimes they will ask you a question about what they were talking about, so you needed to really pay attention. So I'm quite confident that you will all listening attentively to Mr. Mj. He has spoken quite interesting aspects on the need to reform and relook at our model. In his presentation, I think you can hear that he doesn't seem to like the idea that most of it is financed offshore. Now we go to Mr. Paul Zakaria, the Farmers Union, you are producing the tobacco. Are you happy? You have had record production a few years. I think something is working right. Something is right with the financing model, because you can't be recording record production and the financing model is not right. So, what are your views really on the financing model? Could it get any better, or do you want it to be 100%? Maybe when it's 100% offshore, probably will even get better because now it's 95% and you're doing very well. What figures really are we talking about here in terms of funding tobacco? What amounts are they? Does the money exist in the banking sector? I'm happy with persistence here from the RBZ. Do we have the money? Maybe it's an issue where the money that is needed in the financing of the tobacco does not even exist. And what are the regional trends? What's happening in Malawi? What happens in Zambia? How is tobacco funded in other areas? So I think you definitely, you are the right person to give us insights, and of course your views on whether indeed the financing model is balanced and it needs to be relooked. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And let me also recognize the leadership of the SINPEPAs and TIMB, Chair, and the CEO and other dignitaries that are here. The question that you asked, are we happy? Maybe I will summarize that at the end of my brief talk. The financing model, as described earlier, it presents some serious challenges, and one can actually see the gaps that need to be dealt with. And Dr. Mjay brings some of those very critical points to the fore. We certainly cannot be happy with retaining only 12.5% of the revenue generated, retaining that in the country. That means we are doing certain things not, properly. We are exporting quite a lot of revenue generated out of the sweat of the farmers, local farmers. So this financing model needs to be revisited. There is really nothing wrong, ideally, if everything was, all things being equal, there is nothing wrong in accessing offshore finance. There are certain elements that one would want to say, look, if I borrowed offshore, I can use this money and then, spin off quite a number of benefits for the economy. But in offshore pre-financing, tobacco farmers sometimes bring into the country part of the export proceeds in the form of inputs. That is generating business for foreign companies. That is one very, very critical point to note. So there are manufacturers that are outside our borders that end up benefiting out of this industry. And in most cases, their prices, because of the constraints that we may be experiencing from time to time, their prices are inflated. The inflated prices or overpricing will result in a number of other, challenges in terms of meeting contractual obligations locally. Farmers end up being caught up in debt traps, and we know quite a number of our farmers that are failing to come out of this from tobacco companies to finance their operations. The bulk of the export proceeds are used to pay off offshore loans. By supporting foreign economies. In my other life, I worked for financial institutions, and I can tell you firsthand that local banks can then be only used as conduits for bringing business to So the greater proportion rather of the revenue generated stays offshore, and that in itself is not a very good thing. We cannot be happy about that. But let me end by saying, in the absence of offshore financing, we face yet another challenge, that is of the local financing models. If we were to finance our tobacco 100% locally, the benefits are immense. We have a lot of control over the product. We can add value, much higher, 25% gradually growing until probably we get to 100%. That's owning and controlling the aspects of our economy effectively. So the only challenge with the local at the moment is that it's not very favorable for agricultural production in general. It isn't. And it doesn't give much leeway to a producer. The cost of the money is far too high. Sometimes the tenor is not as sensitive to the agricultural seasons, and we end up having those challenges again, debt traps, etc. So local funding opportunities will probably create competition and give people choices as opposed to the current situation where farmers are tied to a few contractors. So we still have quite a lot to do. And even for us in agriculture, accessing finance using the asset that you have, which is called land, we still need to do quite a lot of work in terms of giving confidence to the financial institutions for them to be able to say, yes, we can extend a facility on the back of the instrument that confers access to the land, be it a 99-year lease, a title deed, or whatever. So those are some of the things that are challenging, that are presenting as challenges in the economy at the moment. So let me then end up by saying, no, farmers are not happy, and we would want to contribute to the economy positively, and yet these are some of the challenges that farmers are facing. The value chain itself is very, very limited. I mean, you can look at the figures that were presented, 2-3 processors. These are still very, very limited interventions in the economy. And yet we can actually grow a whole vibrant economy out of tobacco only if we just changed or we adjusted the model of tobacco of financing tobacco production in the country. So I would end there and say, yeah, indeed, farmers are not happy with what is prevailing at the moment.
Thank you. Let's clap hands for him. Quite interesting to hear that the farmers are not happy when they are actually producing record of their record output. So you can imagine how much more they would produce if they were happy. So if an unhappy crop of farmer group that is still producing. It's quite interesting insight from Mr. Zagaria from the Farmers Union. I think it's quite clear from his presentation that a lot needs to be done. I know we have bankers here. He spoke about the issue of bankers. Maybe it's an issue. I don't understand this myself. The external financiers, they finance, do they ask about title deeds or all these other things, which the local banks ask for? Why is it that when the external financiers come in, they don't have this stringent condition and so on, and yet our bankers here, it seems from what he's saying, they start to talk about issues of collateral, land issues, and so on. When the foreigners just come in, they understand. Is it that the bankers are arrogant? We have arrogant bankers in this country? Because it's true as well that the banking sector is now more in the hands of the locals. The international banks have been exiting. So where is the sabotage really? Because at the end of the day, you can see that still value is being exported 12.5% of the value only remaining, of the revenue remaining, says a lot about the loss of value. I'm an economist, so many other times, way back in the days before we both understand about tobacco, everyone would say, the tobacco season is coming, so they will start to stabilize and so on. But guess what? Every time tobacco season would start, nothing would change on the exchange rate front. The exchange rate would continue depreciating. And at the end of the day, many people out there don't even understand why, at a time that we have a lot of inflows in foreign currency, the exchange rate doesn't even improve. So he has actually spoken about that. Now let's go to Mr. Marcel. You are the experts in blending. We hear as well that in that sector there are only a few. I'm not so sure whether they are local or foreigner, but I think we need your input here. How are you seeing the financing sector? And how does it even speak to that industry where you are the blending, the processors? Are the local banks coming on board? Who is financing the processors? Do you think local banks would do better to help bring in more indigenous players in the industry?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Let me also appreciate the Zim papers for giving me this opportunity to come and articulate the issues that are prevailing in our industry, particularly the issue of the funding, as we speak and discuss with the local funding and offshore funding. Let me also recognize the presence of the chairman, Mr. Peter English, acting CEO, Mr. Emmanuel Machairi, and also the presence of Comrade Changwa and Persistent. Let me maybe start to say, is the financial model balanced? No, it's not balanced. Is it what we want? No, this is not what we want. Let me speak from the point of view of the merchant. And maybe let me start to draw the numbers in the play so that we can then understand and then profile the local financial institutions, whether they've got the capacity. I understand we have got representatives from Bankers Association of Zimbabwe. They might need also to respond to this. We are looking at about 140,000 farmers, or we can say the small-scale farmers, doing 1 hectare. If you are to finance these ones, giving them a total input package of average, some they surpass, some maybe just below. Let's talk about 1,000 per hectare. That will take us to almost 140 million. If you are to appropriately finance these farmers, we are looking at about 140 million. If we are to do 300 million kgs of tobacco, and we are talking about an average price of $3.50 per kg, ticket price, we are not talking of anything less than 1 billion that needs to be paid out to the farmers. So already we are talking about in excess of more than 1 billion that is needed to be injected in the tobacco industry. We are looking at the value chain, the addition, the value addition. The laminar processing from the processors, we are talking, the numbers may vary depending on the relationship and whether you are shareholder of that processors. But let me take a very average figure of about 40 cents per kg. So we need to process 300 million, paying 40 cents. Already we are now talking about something which is closer to almost like 150. We add on that. We're talking about the operational expenses, the statutory fees and everything, the salaries, administration, the warehouse. We are talking about the quantum which comes closer to almost like 2 billion. That needs to be available in the local markets. Does the local financial institutions have this capacity to say 70% of that we can provide? Can they provide 1 billion into the market? I don't think so. They have got that capacity. So in as much as the financial model is not balanced, but we have no option, we still need to rely on the offshore funding. The local financial institutions, they give you interest rates, they put arrangement fees, they put establishment fees, the interest on it all plus establishment fees, the cost of capital is coming to almost 16%. You take that one, you compare it with the offshore funding that you are getting. You are getting something in the region of about 6, 7, 8%. So look, here it's a question of making a business decision. Some of the offshore funding that we are talking about, it's not like merchants are going in to borrow from international banks. We are actually getting these funds from buyers, our buyers of the tobacco that we are going to process. So they do what we call a pre-financing. So they are saying, look, merchant A, we want about 1.2 million kgs from you, and we are in February, we are advancing you 1.6 million USD, so that you can purchase the tobacco, you can process it, then you can sell this tobacco to us. And this money is coming at 0% interest rate. Does our local financial institution can they provide something which is competitive enough to offset this low offshore funding, where I'm getting a pre-financing at 0%? So we need to really look and then profile the local financial institutions to see whether they've got the capacity. Capacity in terms of providing competitive financial terms. Repayment periods. I think the good thing is Comrade Mchanga is here. He has been championing to say that you brought CTI into Zimbabwe. But look, the repayment for CTI, it takes you 18 months. You supply a kg to CTI today, they will pay you after 18 months. You borrow from a local bank, they want you to repay in 12 months. There's already a mismatch in terms of what? The financial model. So those mismatch in terms of repayment periods, they need to be looked into locally here. So that we can now start to talk about local financial institutions supporting or offsetting the offshore funding. The collateral requirements that are being asked by the local financial institutions, yes, they are in business. They need to, to mitigate risk. But again, me as a merchant, I'm borrowing from the local banks, or I'm using retained funds, and I'm doing an on-lending to a farmer who doesn't provide a security to me. The banks are not willing to do that. I, as a merchant, am willing to do that. And if you are looking at the recovery rates, debt recovery rate that are prevailing, let me talk about maybe if you are very good, maybe 85%. So if you put 1 million into contract farming, you are assured, rest assured that 150,000 is lost. You are not going to get it. So these are the challenges that are there, and these are the numbers that are there. But if we cannot continue talking about the private financial institutions without raising the issue of what government is doing also to help and finance the tobacco value chain. It is very important that we look closely into the model that is happening in Tanzania now. Because if we don't take lessons from what Tanzania is doing, I think we might also in the next 5 years start to lose our market share as Zimbabwe. Because what is happening is the global cigarette manufacturers are warming up to Tanzania tobacco. One is competitive because the government is supporting the farmers, providing guarantees to the farmers through the farmers' unions and cooperatives. And then the farmers, they get cheap inputs. They produce their tobacco in a cost structure which is competitive than Zimbabwe. And their tobacco is actually cheaper than Zimbabwe. I'll tell you that most of my clients that I have, they will ask me, Tapio, what you are providing us for this particular grade is a bit expensive, but we will buy maybe 30% of it. In any case, it's actually not available in Zimbabwe because the demand is huge. But can you talk to your Tanzanian counterparts so that they can supply us maybe the 70% requirement that we need? And once they reconstitute their blends in their tobacco cigarettes, they cannot change overnight. So we need to watch out what is happening in Tanzania. The growth has moved from 50 million, 123 million, and this year it might get to about 180 million. It's because the government is supporting the farmers. What is the government doing here in Zimbabwe to support this? Because the financial institutions, they don't have the capacity. Mr. Petrovich is here, Mr. Machaire is here. We need to revisit and see what made TICS to fail. Can we remodel, can we correct and see what government can start to do to support the farmers? The 60 million that they've actually spoken about, maybe last year but one, I haven't seen it materializing. We need to see government participating. We are talking about factories in terms of value addition. But the guys that have got factories for cigarette manufacturing, these are competitors to me. If I say I want to come there and do my cigarettes, they will not allow that for me to do for manufacturing. Why? Because I'm a competitor. It's different from a GLT processing plant. For the cigarettes, if I go to company X, they will not allow that. I will take their market share straight away. Why is the government not coming in to say, let's set up a toll manufacturing plant for the cigarettes? At 10,000 cigarettes a minute plant, it's enough. You can come with your cigarettes, you do toll manufacturing, you sell your cigarettes. You can do the same thing. We need to look at that. Government has to make sure that it de-risks the industry so that the private players, financial institutions, can have appetite for that. So we need the government to lead into that. We need government venture capital to say, fine, this is a potential growth industry. As government, we are putting in money so that the other players, the private players, they also see the appetite, the opportunity, and they can bring their money also to participate in that. So we really need answers also from government with regard to that. So I think we can discuss more, but let me just end here so that we can give others opportunity. But there are plenty of issues that we need to discuss. Thank you.
I think you could hear when he was speaking, he was balanced. You know, our lecturers tried to balance issues. When he was speaking, Mr. Zakaria, representing the farmers, you could see that, look, he has the farming at heart. He's concerned about what's best for the farmers. And when you hear a merchant speak, you see, they are interested in the dollars. You see, you can see that he is a merchant, he is someone who's producing tobacco, who is in business. You see, he has the figures at hand. He can justify why the local financial services sector, for example, has no capacity whatsoever. Thank you so much for the insights. They were very interesting. In fact, I think we are learning a lot. He spoke about interesting issues. I think he could prove from his figures that the local financial institutions have no capacity. I think what our deposit-based persistence, our total loans in this country is not about $2 billion. Only $2 billion in total deposits in this economy. And when you look at our loan to deposit ratio around 50%, it's just about $1 billion that has been lent to everyone in the economy. And agriculture will get maybe about 20% of that. So just maybe you do the numbers, you will see that from what he said, definitely the local institutions have no capacity to finance. From just looking at the numbers, and it's quite interesting. So there you are. You have heard from the three panelists their views on the financing model. It's now time for us to get the views. If there are questions that you want to ask the panelists, they've made interesting presentations on the financing model. Is it the right one? Is it balanced? I think we all have formed some opinion of some sort. Any questions that you may want to pose to the panelists? We still have about 25 minutes to interrogate the issue. Ambassador Muchang.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I will still be coming back in the afternoon. That's when I was looking. But I'm happy that I'm here to take us, which I'm passionately committed to. Because of the death of industry in 2004, 2005. And from the presentations which have been made, there are a lot of regulatory issues, there are a lot of issues of international finance, and there are also issues of just capital and private enterprise taking part in this industry. I just want to bring in an element of scale. The world tobacco industry is about, in terms of turnover, about 900 and something billion US. We are talking of the one which is above ground. If I add 300 billion US of the smuggled aspect, the contraband aspect, this is a huge industry. We are talking of about 1.2 to 1.3 trillion US dollars of this industry. So perspective is very important. And coming from what the merchant was saying, that if we can have that in mind, then we want to know where we want to place ourselves as a country. And he has highlighted, and he has also the moderator highlighted a point. Our capital base in this country, compared to 1.3 trillion US, is very small. And to try to make that capital base make a change on an industry of 1.3 trillion US, it's probably not realistic to say a team of them. We must leverage where we are strong. And over the years we've proved that we can produce. That's why Pete alluded to the area which is flavored tobacco. For governments, and I want to highlight this, and sorry I may be long-winded. For governments, the only reason why there is tobacco industry for governments in the world, and I want to remove Anglo-Saxon governments, is because it's tax. Without the tax aspect, there's no tobacco industry in the world. Because tobacco is Zimbra for all the governments in the world, except the Anglo-Saxon government, which originally started the industry. So it is one industry where there is no free private sector companies in the world, for governments in the cigarette industry. All of them are owned by the government, except for the original Anglo-Saxon countries. That's why you can talk of 0% funding from outside, because it's government money. The buyers of tobacco in China, the buyers of tobacco in Japan, the buyers of tobacco in Germany, in France, they are all government institutions. They are not private sector institutions. Because you cannot have free trade in cigarettes, because it is a revenue for that particular country. I hear some people here say, you are almost telling me you would tell the Chinese government they should give their tax department to the Zimbabwe government, to the Zimbabwe industry. Or Turkish company give their, or Indonesian company. It won't happen because it is the basis of their taxation. So if we start from that realism, we will then try to carve out what is the proper place for Zimbabwe in the global market. And the starting point is having a collaborative relationship with the end users, which is the government which owns those companies. If we start from that, we'll be able to solve most of the issues which we are talking about here, because we produce good quality flavor tobacco. In China, the saying is that the higher the percentage of flavor tobacco from Zimbabwe, the higher price you can demand from the smoker. So the best cigarette brands in China, they have between 11 to 16% of Zimbabwe's flavor tobacco. And what does it do? It adds to the revenue of the Chinese of China Tobacco, which is a government-owned company. So we must leverage the fact that we are in the high end. We are the Louis Vuitton for a woman's break. We are the Louis Vuitton for the cigarette industry. Those are things which we need to study. So I would really want to appeal that we put more intellectual study to understand the nature of the market, all the way through from the grower to the big major companies which are in charge of the global trade and cigarettes. He mentioned something very interesting, toll manufacturing. You know that Dubai is $3 billion worth of cigarette factories. Dubai. Yeah, that's Abu Dhabi. I mean, that's Why have they been able to have $3 billion of cigarette manufacturing? And also, I talked about contraband. Most of it finding its way to the global market through other ways, because they penetrate the market. Why couldn't we position ourselves accordingly? What are the things we should buy deep, which we did not take note of, that they don't grow tobacco, we grow the best flavored tobacco. So a proper academic appreciation of this industry, rather than emotions, would help. And he highlighted, if the model is making the farmers produce, you want local companies to come. Why did they lose the market in the first instance to start to tobacco? Because they took an ideological position. Why do we convert from auction to contract? I had to do that. I was the ambassador. Because there was a refusal by the local market to fund the new farmers. That is the reality. Now that they succeeded, you want now to come and say, genuine, but there's a ask for more support. You go to compete for the business, don't ask for charity for this business. So, that's I need a local financial institution. And then I also want to highlight one last aspect, and the biggest influence was the instability in the currency for many years, which we now show by going forward. But for many years, the only way we sustained the currency was tobacco. It is only the advent of gold now, is the SMEs, which is added another element. So these are the two industries which are part of the city, tobacco and gold. So we're operating in an advantageous position. How do we leverage those two industries? And then the last point I want to make, we want to become part of 1.3 trillion. We need more capital from outside rather than try to canvas little capital from inside. We need to carve out a position on the global stage. So reaching out to measures, including the measures with the consuming countries, is what will make this industry become global. Not trying to shout at foreign. We just don't have the domestic market to consume the cigarettes which our tobacco produces. We don't have. We also have those with the target market, Indonesia, China, India, big populations, the United States. These are the markets which we target. We have to find a relationship with them so that we can grow the industry. Because there are three things in business: marketing, marketing, marketing. I think.
Thank you, Ambassador. In fact, when Chris speaks, you expect the ideological aspects, you expect a lot of data as well, be it English or figures. So I think any other comments or contribution?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is George Serama from Zimbabwe. I'm representing farmers. Well, I was listening to the speakers and presenters in terms of financing. There is 85% that is which you can recover from farmers. That is very interesting. The 85% and 15% is risk, which is taken by the nations. And I tend to give a bit on that. We still feel as farmers that the risk of growing tobacco is thrown on us farmers only. Because we have seen a record increase in terms of mentions, contractors getting into tobacco, and also we have seen them growing in terms of their setup, meaning that they are making profits. So we only conclude that is we are the only ones taking the risk of the instability of the tobacco production cycle. So I'm appealing to those ones in the sector, the stakeholders, that is, yes, we know that there are global trends, there are local market affecting, but let's share the risk equally. At the moment, we feel like the risk is only thrown on us. I think that needs to be addressed. And then coming to local financing, I've seen an increase that is in fertilizer sales. Our cost of production has gone up because of fertilizers and chemicals. I don't know whether it is the market or it is the finance which is expensive from our financiers, but the local finance is available. We spoke about banks not capable of financing. Yet, us as farmers, we do have the money. Some of us will bank the money, but at the end, it's borrowed to us. But that organization is what we're asking for. We need to get organized. The funding, we do not, truly speaking, we do not need external financing. That is, if we get organized as farmers, as that is the stakeholders in the tobacco sector, if we get organized and restructure the business and the models, how we are doing our things, I think the local financing will be able to be accessed. And the government side, they initiated TICS. I would want also to correct it on this platform, that is, TICS didn't fail because of farmers. It failed because of the structure it was handed over to the industry. So let's not put the blame for TICS on the farmers. The TICS was abused and it was not the farmers' fault. We are appealing to the government to come up with such initiatives again, not to give up. TICS failed, but give us another chance. The 60 million you pledged, bring it back through farmers' associations, through farmers' unions, our involvement as farmers. If we get involved in whatever is being done, we can solve quite a lot of problems. That's why you heard us calling ourselves Zitoga, because we are on our own. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the insights. It's quite interesting, especially when the farmers are now talking. These are the guys that are producing the tobacco. And they are telling you that they might not need to need this financing from offshore if everything is right. Quite interesting. I will allow Mr. Zakaria later on to give us further insights on that, on whether indeed the local financing, whether it's quite possible. We have seen it in maize, I think. For a long time, they would just do it bargain on their own and send it to GMB. But I think it's because GMB ended up not paying anyone. In time, eventually bankrupting the farmers. And, all of a sudden, no one is interested in maize anymore, not because it's not productive, it's not efficient, or it's not profitable, but because you know that once you do cheap maize, tomorrow the government will actually tell you that you're not allowed to move with your maize and so on. It's just and GMB doesn't pay you. Very interesting insight. Any other comments? Thank you. Farmers, I would love as well to hear more from the farmers. These are the people that are producing the tobacco, that are feeding the whole value chain and making everyone rich.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moderator. I'm a farmer, but I'm also someone who understands the industry very well. I'd like to make a few comments. I'd like to start with the issue of self-financing. Mr. Chairman, the chairman talked about the need for self-funded growers, for contract growers to be paid at a price which is higher than what's obtaining on the auction. In the present moment, our total auction, the price for average price for the auction is sitting at $3.60. The price for contract is standing at $2.48. There's a difference of 12 cents there. We are saying that the merchants are making it easier. They are taking the risk, etc. Yet it could be that if we are to actually ensure that what the Mr. Chairman said is actually happening, we would actually see a lot of money coming into the hands of the growers. And we might actually have a situation whereby the growers are actually able to self-finance themselves. I think we actually need to have a look from the regulatory perspective, how this has become that we actually have a contract which is paying less than what is supposed to be paying. Something that needs to be looked at. And secondly, I'm looking at the issue of the environment. Tobacco farmers, generally speaking, have caused a lot of harm to the environment. And we are saying, let's put 300 million. What are we doing to ensure that the 300 million that we are putting towards, have we made enough strides to ensure that we have protected the environment? If you drive down to Mount Army, you see the deserts that we've created as growers. What are we doing about it? It's a regulatory issue. I'm glad that the regulator is here and they'll probably tell us what they are doing and whether we need to continue to push to 300 million. I know that the charity is doing something. They are doing that those plants where they're using LPG, something that we actually need to have a look at. Then lastly, I think that as an industry, we need a third way that looks at the way we are producing our tobacco. We cannot continue the way that we're actually producing right now and hope that everything will be okay. Mr. Chairman talked about irrigation, talked about agronomy. We are sitting on average 1,000 kgs per hectare, yet we can go to 4,500 kgs. Charity has certified their varieties that we can produce 4,500 kgs per hectare, yet we are sitting on 1,000. I think as an industry, we need to relook at the way that we are producing our tobacco so that we actually hit the 4,000 kgs. This is not only the nation or the farmer, but it's something that we all need to come together and say, how do we ensure that we increase our productivity so that we are able to actually compete with Tanzania, like what Tabio was saying. We're actually able to compete on the global scale. Let us concentrate on agronomy. Let us concentrate on productivity so that at least we are able to ensure that Zimbabwe tobacco, we are the best. And the flavor that we produce, like Ambassador said, is the best. So how do we ensure that we do that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very important insight. It's good when the farmers talk because they are the ones that are making everything happen. I hope you are making a lot of money, sir. I hope you are making a lot of money. Any other comments? Maybe that's the last comment before we go back to the moderator so that they just give us a roundup on the issues. We have a hand there. Your voice is loud enough, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm a farmer and also a conservative club for farmers. Farmers in interest. Thank you so much, Mr. Masafero. Thank you so much. Right. We would like to probably look at the farmer as being centric. Whether we are getting our offshore funding or whether we are getting our internal funding, is it benefiting the farmer? Is it sustainable for the farmer? That's our major question at the moment. Let me just refer you to the previous report that we got from TMB from 2022-23 savings. Internally, the average selling price was $3.17, and the export price was $7.23. You can see that there. It explains about what it means to the farmer. The farmer even pay $3.01 for this product. That much is price which is far below production cost. And that is what is just showing as farmers. That is what is just led as farmers to accrue debts for which we think that we don't deserve the debts. Because immediately the tobacco is the farmer, it gets a very high value. Although this is still wrong. So let us focus on that. Whether the funding comes from offshore, whether it comes from the internal system, is it benefit to the farmer? It will be up to the farmer then to say, I wanted this one more than that one. And there should be a competition right as for now. From the internal system and the offshore system. We will find this one, the impact of the previous funding, it has already caused a lot of damage. In record, we are saying 95% of the farmers are contracted. It is not because they have contract. It is because they've gone through a series of years of being driven into poverty. They have no option now. In the current scenario, if you look deeper, it's not even promoting any situation. I would like to applaud and give a compliance, contractor compliance approach. What it spells, probably, you say things like that contractors should look at whether farmers are sending their kids to school, whether farmers are having PPEs. Those things must be emphasized in order to upgrade the standard of living of farmers. And then we can talk thereafter about return, the marginal return after sales. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Mchangwa. Yes, we are now just a few minutes. I will allow you to cut your intervention. Yeah.
I just want to ask, if the business for the farmers is so bad, why is the production rising? And because they would have left the industry. If it's negative returns, they've left the industry. Again, they left the maize industry because the returns were negative. So, we want objective. If we can get objective information, that's the job of this conference. Then we make the right decisions.
Thank you, Ambassador. Very interesting.
And that's another one. Why would we want the farmer to take the risk of financing so if there's alternative financing? Why this fetish about self-financing? I mean, in America, the farmers, the Chinese pay before the season. Chinese banks pay American farmers to produce before the season starts, because China needs security of food. The farmer doesn't have to take the risk of farming in America. Because the off-taker is going to pay for it. What's wrong with the off-taker paying for the product which is going to use for the industry? I think.
Very interesting questions. I would allow him and the representatives of the farmers to. Why are you still in business? We'll start there. Why are you still in business? That's right. And are you dying for this country?
I want to believe that being very honest, Mr. Mchangwa is a war veteran. He's a war veteran. He went to war, they fought for the land. If you look at the farmers that we are talking about, they are beneficiaries of the Land Reform Act. And in Zimbabwe, we know that we are an agro-based economy, and we will not leave our land. We'll try to work on it. We can solve any problems coming, but we still put effort on our land, and we still want to say, you want to benefit from the land. The current scenario can only show that we are working very high, very difficult on our land, but we are not enjoying the fruits of this land. Which probably, we may still say, we are still under neo-colonialism. We are still under neo-colonialism. And it is an error that we are trying to fight. When we are looking forward for Vision 2030, we always are saying we want an upper middle income tobacco grower. We need to raise this value. We need to realize the value of this crop. So it's not about why are you going to working on farms and so on. This is our land. why put almost 69% of this land production? Because our economy is based on this agronomic system. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, yes, responded to get another. They want to die on the land. The land which they got from Ambassador Trump when he went to war. So they want to die on the land. The chairman.
Thanks. I just want to urge all participants to be careful of being divisive. This is an industry that we're working together to get ahead. No one wants to make a small-scale farmer poverty-stricken. We have to work together. And I think as long as we're doing that, we will succeed. We have succeeded. Massive strides have been taken. We went from under 50,000 to nearly under 50 million to nearly 300 million working together. Let's keep that going.
Thank you. Yeah. What else would you expect from the chairman of the industry? These are diplomats. The industry is growing. Let's work together. Thank you, chairman.
Okay, thank you once again. First of all, I would like to respond to Ambassador Changa in terms of why are we still in business. Why are we still in business? Because we've got no option. The only available immediate payment source other than horticulture is tobacco. And also, it doesn't mean that we are making profit out of it. We get payment that is after yielding our tobacco and bring it to the market, we get immediate payment in 48 hours. Payment whether we made a loss or not, but that's attracting us. Other than that, tobacco growing is not profitable from the statistics that we were having. There have been government subsidies, there have been contractors taking the risk, but we are all milking farmers. And then secondly, I would want to respond to our chairman, Mr. Devonish, in terms of us trying to be positive and growing up together, building the sector. Yes, we all want to make a living out of tobacco, but at the same time, we cannot remain quiet, dying, and stricken in poverty. It's evident by reports that is some farmers lost even their houses because they tried to get into tobacco. What has been happening, most of us, we sort of like maybe I'm coming from the diaspora, I would like to do a small business in Zimbabwe, and then I take my savings into tobacco, and then that savings is gone, and I sell my mombes, that savings is gone. Where is it going? From us, from our look at the moment, we just feel like probably there is somebody who is benefiting, because we have seen a lot of, I don't want to call them a lot of also companies coming out of tobacco, they are making a living. But if I look at us farmers, I'm not seeing any growth. We used to have squash carts, fertilizers, even cars bought going back to the tobacco farmers, but it's no longer at the top at the moment. So we are saying we want that corrected. We are positive, we want to continue producing for the industry, but we cannot remain quiet. We have to complain to address. We have seen the cotton died. At the end of the day, government is suffering, is subsidizing now because we have remained quiet about it. We better say it in this platform so that it's taken note of, to be addressed, be it government, be it stakeholders. We are not here to hero worship or to say, because this one is done better. We are here for ourselves as farmers at this platform, I mean to say. Thank you very much.
You want to take this for you? Thank you for supporting the industry, and we hope you keep supporting the industry. It's quite interesting discussion. It's unfortunate we ended up almost running away from the topic. But look, that's what tobacco does, isn't it? Even if you have not smoked, you end up the war room ends up talking about things that are not related to the topic. Yeah, your last in 2 minutes, you have heard the comments from the delegates. You want to change your mind in terms of whether local financing should remain, or what are your thoughts?
I'm not changing. I'm not changing my thoughts. I stick to my hands. Right? In 2 minutes that I've been given, I would like to say that unless maybe it is process of illicit financial flows, offshore financing is not a bad thing at all to our industry and value chain. I think the issue here, or the problem, is the ratio of beneficiation, or the beneficiation model. As long as it is still 85% to 87.5% to 4.5%. Because we are saying, if you take the national perspective, we are entering into a contractual agreement with the owners of capital, who are the financiers. And we are providing our land, our labor, and everything to produce the tobacco which they so require. So this is a contractual relationship. And when we have produced the proceeds, how are they going to be shared? So it is the sharing of the cake that is skewed in favor of the owners of capital. So we are saying our land, our labor, and other resources that we put in are less valued compared to the capital that is coming to support. I think that is where the major issue is. And now, how do we maybe try to tilt the scale in our favor? Right? So one way of doing it might be to say, yes, we might not have the powers to change the ratio when it comes to negotiating with the capitalists, but government can come in with funds. And someone has already alluded to it, that we need government to come in so that we retain a much greater share of the cake. And also value addition, local value addition is another way of enhancing competitiveness of the value chain and also retaining share of the cake which are proceeds from the value added. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In fact, you can hear that when he speaks, you can actually tell that it's not only people that he knows that are nationalists, isn't it? Some are still living in Europe. Thank you so much. It's a proponent for local value addition and for value to Zimbabwe. Mr. Zagaria, your constituents, the farmers, they seem not to be happy. They are not happy. They've war about almost everything. The prices are not good. They are working so hard. The prices that they are getting for the inputs are inflated. Look, no one cares about the farmers. Everyone just wants to make money from the farmers. From just after the farmers, the merchants, the processors, and so on. That's where the money is. That's where people have helicopters. They have nice suits like your neighbor. They have beautiful shoes and all that. But the farmers themselves that are doing. What should happen?
Thank you. You see, you just summed it up. Yes, in 2 minutes, and it's actually hardest than that. You just look at me how I'm dressed. My neighbor, you couldn't even use me as an example. But to be honest, farmers are not making money. Let's go into the database of the growers, 140,000. You look, just analyze that database, you will see that the grower base is not like growing out of retained farmers. Sometimes it's actually very new farmers who have heard stories about the tobacco base and so on, and then they come through and they produce, they get their hands, their fingers burnt, and they disappear. So most of our farmers are going into production purely because somebody is going to lend inputs. But then they are trapped in debt. And this is what I alluded to earlier. The profitability levels at the farmer level, they are very, very appalling. And we need to look at that. Now, there is no tobacco to talk about without the producer. Everybody else who is making money upwards, They do so because there is somebody who is actually suffering down there. And the history that that was shared earlier on will show you that this thing was in the making for many, many years, positioning certain players into places where they now control, like Ambassador says, they now control the industry worldwide. So for them to give up that space easily, that will never happen. So it calls for policy at the national level for us to be able to then say, how can we grow wealth out of this, first for the producer and then upwards? What are the things that we need to put in place to ensure that the producer is happy? And allow me to just end with this. For as long as our farmers are contracted forever, 95% of the crop that is being produced is contracted. Only 5% they find their way. So 95% of them, they are crying out and they are saying, look, we can't breathe. The inputs are far too heavy. The producer price is very low, close to the break-even point. And then the recovery in terms of inputs that would have been extended for production, the prices are inflated. They are crying, they can't breathe. This is the point that is coming from the farmers. And nobody has looked at it to say, can we assist in this process? And finally, I agree, Ambassador Mtambo, there is need for us to do a clear and concise technical appreciation, intellectual appreciation of the whole process. But let's not forget that there is a farmer. When we start looking at this and the process and the value chain, it starts from the farmer. Let's look at the farmer. How is he faring? How is she faring? Those are my closing remarks.
Thank you. You spoke like a bishop, really. You were so passionate about the farmers. I now have no doubt why you are at Zimbabwe Farmers Union. Lastly, Mr. Marcel, look, let's not worry about the farmers. Let's go back to the issue of the financing model. Don't worry about the farmers. Let's just talk about what's possible and what is not possible. Any new thoughts, or you still understand, believe that we don't have?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I was still staying with my position, and I would want to say it's important that government takes a leading role in terms of ensuring that there is local funding. What the government cannot cover, then has to be covered by offshore funding. We still need offshore funding. But if it is the government, let's look what is happening in Egypt. Whatever cigarette that is manufactured in Egypt is by state monopoly. And then government gets the revenue, the taxes that are needed to oil the economy. We are talking about Lebanon. You don't do business of tobacco in Lebanon. It's state monopoly. I'm not asking to say, let's just take that mirror image of Egypt, Lebanon, or maybe let's take the mirror image of China. China, the regulatory board, the State Tobacco Monopoly Administration, it is responsible with the regulation, controlling the pricing, the production of tobacco, everything. They are the TNB and they are the merchant through their China National Tobacco Corporation and their external wing, CTI, which then mobilizes global resources for tobacco, back to China. We are not saying let's take the same footprint into Zimbabwe, but we are saying our government has to look at that and see how it can actually then incorporate those lessons from those countries which are benefiting from tobacco financing through the local initiatives of the government. Having said that, if you look at the statistics of who is actually exporting leaf tobacco from Africa, if you look at the top 5, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Malawi, Uganda, Zambia, the top 5, they are not the top 5 exporters of cigarettes from Africa. We are not talking about, if you are talking about top exporters of cigarettes from Africa, we are not talking about South Africa, who doesn't produce any leaf tobacco. We are not talking about Tunisia. We are talking about Egypt, Senegal, Ivory Coast. We really need to look at what we can actually do to incubate cigarette production here in Zimbabwe so that we can benefit from the values that we can get from cigarette export. This this has to look at the regulations to say, and also production techniques, because we need also Oriental tobacco to be part of the cigarette blends, which are very key important in the global market of tobacco. You cannot only use FCV Zimbabwe tobacco. We need some kind of Oriental. We need to look into reintroduction of dairy production in Zimbabwe, because much of these blends, they are American blends, which constitute almost 5 to 10% of dairy. And we are not producing dairy in Zimbabwe if we are to be serious in cigarette production. So we need to look at how best we can then reintroduce dairy production in Zimbabwe. So there are so many aspects that we really need to look so that, the tobacco value chain transformation plan can be very successful. But in concluding, I need to help, I think, the farmers. There's been a talk, I think I've spoken to Phineas some other time. They say, you know what, Phineas, I understand the cry of the farmers, but I think what the figures that you are moving around with, they are not true.
Who is Phineas, by the way?
Phineas, yes. I've heard some of these years also. Because what they say, that what this gentleman, my friend here said, he said the average price for tobacco last season was $3 one cent. And they went in to look at the export prices and they were saying $7. We need to do the numbers. If you say $3, we add 40 cents of processing, it takes us to $3.40. We need to add administration fee, we need to pay salaries, we need to pay warehouses. You need to put almost like 25 cents on top of that. If you then take every 100 kgs of tobacco that you buy from the farm, you take it through the GLT processing, you don't get 100 kgs, you get 65 kgs if your yield is very good. So if you take into consideration the loss of yield and also the bank interest rates, which are at about 16%, the tobacco that you was talking about, which is costing $3 cents, it will take you to the cost of almost like $6.80. Before you put a markup.
Thank you.
If you put a markup, $7, we sell $7, you won't make anything. We are not making super normal profits in the merchant. I'm not sure about the cigarette manufacturers, but as merchants, we are making in the region of 13 to 14%. My peers, I think I've seen some of them here. If we're really making super normal profits, we'll be flying with jets.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this particular session. Quite interesting. We're looking at on whether offshore financing is right for the tobacco industry. Whether we kept on track or not is something else to for how the discussion went. But let me take this opportunity to thank our panelists. We can do a round of applause for them. And of course, the many contributors that came in, they are leaving me alone here. All right, it's time for, I'll put this time back to the master of ceremonies, but it was quite an interesting session. We had a lot. I hope, let's be together again for the next session. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause to Mr. Grace for the lively discussion. So we are going to have another panel later on, so please don't go anywhere. Please stick around. We are also going to have very lively presenters throughout the day, so stay with us until 4 p.m. We would like to thank our sponsors. They have made this happen. Ministry of Lands, thank you very much for sponsoring. Stanbic Bank, Pacific Cigarettes, TIMB, POSB, SBC. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. We also have exhibitors in our midst. So as you are going to have a tea break, please pass through the tents of our exhibitors and see what they are offering. As Zim Papers, we have a product known as Agricultural Journal. It's just a publication for agriculture. We encourage advertisers in our midst that are going to obviously benefit from the agricultural news to put advertising there. We make sure that you reach the target market. Another product that is of interest that we have as in papers is known as Dollar for All promotion. So we have 10 newspapers under a single publication for Dollar for 1 month. I go through the remote, please let me say. So $1 you have access to 10 newspapers for a whole good month. Please see Hilda by the door, by the registration desk. Hilda is going to take you through how you register to have the 10 publications on your mobile. We are going to have a tea break for just 15 minutes. Please quickly grab tea for 15 minutes. For our guests, please can somebody assist to take them through where they're going to have their tea. So let's just have a tea break as fast as we can. Thank you very much. Can we have those who are going to assist our guests to the tea room?